Welcome back to the Turo 100 series episode that I'm doing, where I teach you everything that I've learned in the last 9 years of being a host on the platform. Today's episode is probably going to be one of the 2 most important videos you could possibly watch in this 100 video series. And it's very, very crucial to minimizing any downside risk that you could potentially have when becoming a host on the platform and acquiring vehicles for your fleet. So in today's episode, we're going to recap the last video, which was how do you do your market research, find the car that actually performs that's within your budget, and then how do you actually go out and acquire it at the right deal. This is so crucial because if you overpay for cars and they depreciate excessively while you have them on the platform, you're going to end up in a really bad position to where you have way too much negative equity on your vehicle and you cannot get out of it. And over time, if it becomes less profitable on the platform, well, then you end up with a lot of financial liability. So starting a business is already risk enough, and we want to make sure that we educate ourselves in how this business works so that you don't take on any additional financial liability if you don't have to, right? So that's what it's all about. So we're going to dive deep into that. And then the second most crucial video that's going to come out a little bit later is going to be all about how to actually protect yourself while you're on the platform when it comes to any sort of damage or accidents. So again, you don't have any financial liability. I really think that if you can minimize your financial liability while being a Turo host, then it's a great business to be in, especially if you can find a great car to fit your market. So we're going to run through all of that in this video. You might want to grab a pen and a piece of paper to take notes because it's going to dive deep and it's going to give you everything you need to know. There is no gatekeeping here at all. Completely free information, and again, just everything that I've learned. Quick note, guys, just make sure you hit that subscribe button. As I am putting out this 100 episode series, you'll get notified every single time there is a new episode so that you can learn all things Turo. Okay, so I'm going to make the assumption that you took everything that you learned in the last video and you figured out exactly like what you can see here on my screen, what your affordability is. So if you're taking 10 to 15% of your income, what can you afford when it comes to a car payment, which is then going to determine how much of a car you can actually afford in terms of total cost. So here I've just done a quick, math on what most people can sort of comfortably afford and kind of, averages for car payments, right? So here we're just going to assume, if you can comfortably afford a $500 per month payment at a 60-month term loan, you are going to be able to purchase a vehicle of up to about $26,000. Now, one thing to really remember is right now, times are weird and auto loan interest rates are still very, very, very high. Now, although they've started to correct in some places and for certain categories of cars, they are still relatively high from what we are used to seeing. Those 1%, 2%, and 3% APR loans are kind of non-existent. So you have to get a little bit creative to help bring down your cost of doing business. So a great way to do that is by going through, financial institutions like credit unions, for example, where they offer far more competitive auto loan rates. Okay. So if you looked at your income, you took 10 to 15% of it, you're like, okay, I can comfortably afford about $500 per month. Then you're going to go next, as we discussed in the last video, and do your market research. So I went ahead and actually researched my own market because I'm always really curious to know, what's going on. And so we applied exactly what we learned in the last video, which is, we're searching a couple months out in advance so we can really see all of the inventory that's out there. And then we can get a good idea for the cars that are performing. And as I went through this list, I took notes on cars that looked interesting to me, the day rates that they're getting, the number of days that they're rented per month roughly, and what that could potentially look like in terms of monthly income. And if based on what I'm calculating, that is turning out to be more than $500 per month, which is the cost of your car payment, and we do want it to be 2 to 3 times more because you always want to have room for insurance and maintenance costs, all the variable expenses of being in business, then we really take those options and we consider them as very strong contenders for potential cars that we can list in our fleet. So one of the cars, while I was doing my own market research here, that really stood out to me was this Chrysler Pacifica 2021. Now, immediately I saw I had 85 trips. It was going for $83 per day, which these days, if you thoroughly look at the market, $83 per day is a much higher day rate than we are used to seeing, right? And right now is not really even peak season of Turo just yet because that's typically summertime. So, that means I feel like, okay, it's $83 per day right now. And as we go into summer, it should, traditionally speaking, based on market pattern trends, come up in the summertime, meaning there is even more potential for me to make money. So what I did was I opened up that listing just to confirm if what I thought was true. And I went ahead and I just looked at, okay, how is April performing? I counted the number of days. As you can see here, I'm going to zoom in, the number of days that are dashed out, and I'm going to sort of just estimate, right? That, okay, more or less, it looks like, this car is being rented out for about 7, 8, 9, 10 days so far in April, and maybe it'll pick up about another 5 days. And then in May, it already has advanced bookings, so that's always a really great sign. And then there's also some bookings in June. So these are fantastic signs when you see those advanced bookings coming in that potentially this car is going to perform well. Now, I'm going to expect that you guys do, deep math, but just for the sake of this video, I'm going to do a little back of the napkin type of math for you guys, just to show you how I very quickly figure out if a car is a contender or not. So originally, I saw that, okay, this car had a lot of trips, it has great reviews and ratings, and it's going for $83 per day. And for the month of April, it has 10 days rented out, which isn't fantastic, given that today is already the 23rd of the month. But given that there is still a little over a week to go in the month, it could potentially pick up more days, but it has advanced bookings as well, which is always a promising sign. So with that said, I'm going to just do some really quick math, okay? At $83 per day, it's already been rented out for 10 days out of the month. That is $830. So $830 is your gross, right? Out of that, Turo is going to take their cut. We will discuss this in depth later, but most hosts tend to be on the 75% plan, revenue share plan with Turo, meaning you are giving Turo 25% of your revenue. So if I want to figure out, okay, after paying Turo their cut, how much money am I taking home? Well, 75% of $830 is $622. So given that the car has only been rented out for 10 days out of the month, which again isn't fantastic, it is still above that 500 number, which makes me feel like, okay, we have a solid contender here that potentially has a lot more to gain and more potential to be rented out in the market. So now what we do next is we are going to go see how is this car priced in the market as a buyer. Can I afford this? Can I find this in my payment? Can I find it for below my payment and make even more room for margin? Okay, so this is where things get juicy, and this is where your margins come from. This is so important. I cannot emphasize this enough because so many people miss out on this completely. They just see, oh, a car is performing well, let me just go out and buy this car, list it on a platform, and it's going to yield me the same result. When in fact that is not actually how it works. You have to make sure that your cost of ownership and your cost of doing business with that specific vehicle is as low as it can possibly be so that you expand your room for profit and margin, right? But if you go into a car and you overpay for it, well, then you're immediately going to eat away at any potential possibility for potential profit, and then you're going to end up just paying all that money into the cost of the car. So this is where I feel like people get really emotional and they make hasty decisions because they get excited. It's like, oh yeah, let me just go out, buy this car. I have momentum and I want to start this business and I'm excited, which is amazing. You should have that momentum, but you always want to make sure that you do your due diligence and you make sure that you are acquiring the right car at the right price, because look, no matter what car you end up purchasing, right, you are going to be putting in almost the same amount of labor. So if you're going to be getting a car, make sure you get it as efficiently as possible so you can maximize your revenue for all the labor you're going to put into it, So we want to work smart, not hard. That is always the end game, and we want the outcome to be income. So with that said, one of my favorite websites to use, as you guys can see here, is CarGurus.com. There is a lot of stuff I love about CarGurus. So what I've done here is I just Googled CarGurus.com, Chrysler Pacifica price index. Okay, so you're just going to do that quick Google search and it's going to show up with this link. And again, you can fill in the blank for any car that you're looking for, or you could also just go to cargurus.com and you're going to go to their price trend, and then you can select whatever car you are interested in and start doing your research. Okay, so the very first thing that I always advise everybody to look at, because you might ask yourself, well, how do I know if I'm even overpaying for this car? How do I know if it's overpriced, right? Particularly if you are not familiar with the car market, which obviously most people are not. Most people are not spending their day researching the market and trying to figure out, okay, like, how are prices changing? Times are crazy. The last couple of years have been crazy. Prices have gone up, they've gone down, there's been supply shortages, and now there's more supply and not enough demand. So tons has been happening. But the clearest way to actually get an idea of what is actually happening in the car market, specifically to the car that you are looking to purchase, is by using CarGurus. And as you can see here, one of the things that I've done is I selected the start date to get the price trend graph in 2019, and then I have it to present day. Now, the reason why I do it to 2019 is just because I like to just sort of gauge, how were things prior to 2020 and how are they today in comparison to that. Now, it doesn't mean that prior to 2020 is the normal that we are pegging ourselves to, and that's what we're waiting to come back to, because it is highly plausible that we have a new normal when it comes to prices in the market for really anything, right? Groceries, cars, insurance, anything. So I like to just get an idea. Now, if you follow here with me, this light blue line, as indicated by this legend here, is going to be the pricing for the Chrysler Pacifica between 2019 and 2024. And you can just see, when the supply shortages happened and prices went up, especially in 2022, there was a 30% increase in prices for this vehicle since prior to 2020, which is insane for a cost of a vehicle to go up by 30%. It is absolutely just wild, blows my mind. Now, if you can look at present day, it is actually very close to, if not almost exactly the same as 2019. So since 2019, the Chrysler Pacifica prices are only 0.27% above what they were in 2019. And that is magical, because you won't typically see that for a lot of cars, because the last couple of years things have been haywire. So whenever I see something like this to where it's either close to 2019 or below 2019, I mean, those are green flags all the way. Makes me super happy, and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. These are all the signs that I'm looking for, which means I'm interested in a vehicle that in the market is not overpriced, so I don't even have to worry about that. Because as soon as a car is overpriced, it makes it nearly impossible to purchase it at a good enough deal to where it makes sense to list it on the Turo platform. So all great information so far that we're seeing. Now, if you go down, one of the things that I love to look at right here, you guys see this is like the geeky math side of me that comes out, and like love numbers, obviously. So if you look at 2021, 2022 models, 2023 models, you are seeing right here, this is the year over year change in price. So for 2022 model year Chrysler Pacificas, the price has come down by 29.7%, right? So remember that 30% increase that we saw, it almost corrected itself. Now, what's even more beautiful than that is that in 2023, for the 2023 models, it came down by 10.23%. And so far in 2024, we're not really seeing, actually we are. So if you look right here, in the last 30 days, the prices have come down by over 5%, okay? So typically, red number go down, not a good sign. But in this scenario, it's exactly what we want to see. We want to see as many red negative percentages as we can, because again, that is just lighting the way to, yes, this is a good decision and it's going to potentially be a great buy. Now, of course, now that we have verified all of this information that, hey, okay, this is a car that's not overpriced and I can probably get a good deal on it and the prices have been coming down, that means, there's going to be room to negotiate. There's going to be room to really get this at a good deal. Then you want to go online and you want to start shopping. So how do I actually find this car, make sure it's in my budget, and make sure that I'm getting a great deal on it, okay? So one of the things that you want to do is you want to look at CarGurus is already going to give you a bunch of car listing options. Now, there are tons of online retailers, obviously. You can go to an Edmunds, a CarMax, an Auto Trader. The list is endless, right? CarGurus is just one of them, and pretty much they all aggregate kind of like the same listings. But one of the reasons why I love CarGurus is because they're telling you relative to the market whether or not a car is priced at a good deal or a great deal or a bad deal or a fair deal, right? So we're just going to go ahead and select this see all option here, and we are going to see, well, what cars are listed in my area and which ones could potentially be a good buy. Now here, one of the things that you will notice is that I am looking at used Chrysler Pacificas. Now you can certainly go and look at new models. I did see a bunch of new models during my research, and you could potentially get them at a decent deal. But the key is to stay very close to the car payment that we can afford. But also, if we are going to go the used route, we don't want to purchase a vehicle that is high in mileage so that we don't end up with tons of variable cost when it comes to maintenance, right? Personally, for me, I hate maintenance issues. It's one of the things about the business that is my least favorite. But there are tons of other people who are more car savvy, and they know how to do, small mechanical jobs. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there and ladies, you can change your own oil. You can, maybe change out your brake pads and do all kinds of stuff, right? So maybe if you are more mechanically inclined or you love cars or whatever it might be, higher mileage may not necessarily be an issue for you, but for me, I don't like it. And also, I really believe that if you are trying to run your business in a way that is predictable in terms of revenue, if you can take any downside risk, right, like variable maintenance expense, and you can mitigate that, then it's going to make it much, much easier for you to figure out, okay, this is how profitable this car could be over the long run. So in this case, based on what I've seen in the Turo market and the types of cars that are renting, unfortunately, there isn't as much of a market that can sustain brand new cars these days. It doesn't mean it's going to be like that in the future, and it certainly wasn't like that in the past, but that is what is currently happening in the market, because in order to really be able to turn a margin, you really have to lower your cost of ownership on these vehicles, which typically means that you need to buy slightly used, right? Slightly used, low mileage if you can. That way you don't have to have too many variable expenses. Okay, so with that said, now I am going through all the listings. I picked sort of an area that I would be comfortable purchasing in. And you're kind of just looking at price versus year versus miles, what's looking good to you. I would say these days on Turo, I wouldn't really want to list anything older than 2018. That's just a personal preference of mine. I think that, if you're going much older than that, then you may, receive some resistance from renters who may not want to rent older cars. That's just my own kind of personal way of doing this business. And then also you have to think, if you're going to have this car for 2, 3, or 4 years, it's going to age the vehicle, which will make you less sought after on the platform. That's just my opinion. Not always the case, but I think it can be the case, and you always want to maintain your competitive advantage. So you see right here, you can go 2020, kind of about 35,000 miles, which is going for $26,000, or you can go a couple years older than that, a 2018 with 34,600 miles, going for almost $6,000 less, right? And you can see like they do a quick estimation of what your monthly payment would be. So this is going to just very, very, very quickly tell you, hey, you know what? I can afford this car. It's going to be within budget. It's going to be within, kind of what I was planning, or it's not, right? So like right here, it's like 31,500 estimated, payment is going to be $612, and CarGurus is telling me that's just a fair deal. We're probably going to stay away from that. So anything where it's like it's a good deal, or even if it's a fair deal, then you know that when you go to actually purchase this vehicle, you're going to have to negotiate that car deal to make it a great deal, right? And there's always room for negotiation in all things. So this is kind of why I like to use CarGurus, because it does tell you, whether or not based on market trends and averages, if something is a good deal. So again, you're seeing a few options here. You're going to kind of just look through this, right? And you're going to vet out the dealerships, and maybe they have incentives going on, which color combination looks good to you that you think would perform. So one of the ones that I was looking at that I thought could, potentially be a decent deal, it's a 2020. So I feel like on the platform, it shows up as being kind of newer, because it's still in the 20s versus like an 18 or a 17 or a 16 year. And also it says estimated car payment $511, and it's a good deal. Now, immediately when I look at this, I'm like, okay, it's a white color, nice and neutral for Turo. The year is pretty good. The miles are pretty low. It's pretty close to my payment, which means I'm fairly certain that I can negotiate this deal to potentially get to a better deal. And also, with that said, if you feel like you're not super comfortable with negotiating car deals, one of the things that I put together not too long ago is something I call a car buying guide, completely free. But essentially, I created this car buying guide to maximize your Turo profits, and it's just kind of a step-by-step guide on how to negotiate that car deal, right? Particularly if you're not comfortable with doing it, or if you haven't done it much. In the 40-50 cars that I've purchased throughout the years, I really kind of learned my way. It's just a quick little PDF guide. You can grab it at my website, powerhost.club, completely free, but basically it'll save you from having to take notes, and it's just going to give you a little guide on how to do it, right? So once you find a car like this and you figure out, okay, this is where I need to be, then you can use some of those negotiation tips to really figure out, okay, this is how I'm going to go in and capture that car deal. And then finally, my favorite website, like we started off with for the affordability calculator, NerdWallet also does an auto loan calculator, which I love, right? Because you always want to know what you're walking into and what the math has to look like before you get to a dealership. You don't want the dealer or the salesperson to guide you on, hey, this is what the numbers have to be. No, you want to walk in and you want to say, hey, this is what the math has to be. This is my budget. I cannot go beyond this. Now, it is up to you guys to figure out how you can help me and get me to this number. So that is always how I do it. I always tell them you know what? I wish this was an emotional decision. I wish it was based on, the car has this feature and that feature, and it's this color and it has these rims. But, unfortunately, I just have a very strict budget that I have to stick to, and I don't have room in it. But if you guys are able to help me get to that number, I'm more than happy to do business with you guys. And I have found that every time I use that line, it always works out in my favor, because I think people do truly want to help you and help you figure out, okay, how can we make this happen, right? So you want to make sure that you do that. Now, the reason why I'm showing you guys this auto loan calculator here is because, when we looked at the rough payment of this vehicle, it was $511, right? You can see that right there. Now, our budget was $500. So usually I like to try to aim for lower than my budget so that I can have more margins and I can leave more room for any variable expense, and I can leave room for insurance and maintenance costs and all that good stuff, right? So for me, going into this deal that is priced at roughly about $26,000, I want to see, can I get them to discount this car by about $3,000 to help bring down my monthly cost and give me more room in my budget. So then I just put in here, okay, if I want to buy this car for $23,000, what does the deal have to look like? Well, at $23,000, my monthly payment is going to be $434, right? Which is solid, puts me in a great position. It's going to make me more profitable, and it's going to give me a little wiggle room should I need to spend on other things, right? So that's how you kind of go into, and you're looking at, okay, you're going to do your research on maybe what your credit union or your local bank is offering as an interest rate on auto loans in case you want to refinance through them or finance through them. And then, most loans are at a 60-month period. And so, yeah, that's essentially all you're going to do. And this is literally going to give you every major element of doing this deal and doing it in such a way that it's going to make you profitable on the platform, which is the whole point of it, right? So that's how you really want to go about it. Now, I'm going to put all of these links down in the description below. That way you guys can play with the affordability calculator. You can play with the car loan calculator. And then I will also put a link to the CarGurus price trend graph. And that is going to guide you through doing your research, knowing what you can afford. You never want to walk into one of these deals, at least in my experience, like blindly, right? And not knowing like, ooh, okay, it's very easy to go to a dealership and they're like, okay, you know what, the best we can do, we know you wanted 434, but can you come up just a little bit and do like 520? And maybe in your mind you're like, oh, okay, that's not bad, that's only $90 per month more. I mean, what's $90? I can do $90, right? But then the reality is, if you say, yeah, I can do $90, well, that's like another day or two of rentals, And so you're chipping away at the number of rentable days in a month for your vehicle. So you never want to give into that, because that's how, things begin to sort of slip. And they eat away at your profit margin, which in the long run is going to put you in a tighter position. And that's what you really want to avoid. You always want to be comfortable when you're going into purchasing a vehicle, specifically for the purpose of having it on Turo. Super important. So make sure you guys take notes on that, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.